It started with a sound, a soft metallic pulse beneath the soil of a forgotten California airbase. A man with a metal detector, scanning the edges of the cracked concrete, thought he'd found an old shell casing. Instead, he unearthed a small, rusted tag, smooth on one side, engraved on the other. The letters were faint but readable. Jack, 1945, property of Sergeant M. Hale. The tag was tangled in corroded wire buried just inches below where jet engines had thundered for decades. There were no records of any dog named Jack stationed there, and no mention of a Sergeant M. Hale in surviving rosters. But when the man reported the find, local historians recognized the name instantly, because Hale wasn't just any soldier. He was the airman who disappeared the day the base shut down. During World War II, California's Mojave Desert hosted dozens of secretive airfields, remote, sunburned expanses where the Army Air Forces trained pilots and tested aircraft. The base near Lancaster was known as Eagle Field West, built in 1942 and forgotten soon after the war. It was a place of endless dust, wind, and the low hum of engines echoing against the mountains. Most soldiers stationed there never saw combat. They trained, waited, and dreamed of going home. Among them was Sergeant Matthew Hale, a mechanic and flight engineer known for his quiet demeanor and for the constant companion at his side, a golden retriever named Jack. Photographs from the era show Hale smiling beside his plane, Jack sitting proudly in the frame. They were inseparable, until the final week of 1945, when both the man and the dog vanished without explanation. The military listed Hale as absent without leave. His body was never found. Jack had been more than a mascot. He was part of the base's heartbeat. Trained to follow Hale even onto the tarmac, he would wait patiently during takeoffs, tail wagging, until the roar of the engines faded. He knew every hangar, every mechanic, every scent of aviation fuel and metal. When other soldiers shipped out, Jack stayed behind, always at Hale's heel. But some said there was something unusual about him, that he barked at the sky on nights when bombers circled above, or that he refused to enter one specific hangar after dark. It was superstition, they said, just a dog's instinct. Yet, on the night Hale disappeared, witnesses recalled hearing Jack howling for hours, echoing across the dry desert airstrip. By morning, both were gone, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. According to base logs, a B-25 bomber designated Tango 9 was scheduled for one final test run on September 4, 1945. It was the same plane Sergeant Hale had maintained for months, and the one he was last seen near. But that night, Tango 9 never took off. Guards reported strange movements on the tarmac, lights flickering, doors opening and closing by themselves, engines starting without authorization. Hale was spotted walking toward the aircraft with Jack at his side. Moments later, the power went out across the base for nearly 2 minutes. When lights returned, both were gone, and the bomber's cockpit was empty. The base commander filed an internal report that ended with a chilling line: "No trace of Hale, K-9, or vehicle. Runway disturbed near Hangar B. Investigation closed." Officially, Sergeant Matthew Hale had deserted. Unofficially, his superiors didn't want to ask questions. The war was over. Men were eager to leave, not reopen files that led to uncomfortable answers. The report was buried, marked non-critical personnel loss. But those who had served with Hale remembered him as loyal, methodical, and deeply attached to the base, not the kind of man to abandon his post. Some said he'd been working on something privately, a modification to the B-25's power systems. Others whispered about classified experiments involving radar frequencies and long-range guidance. Whatever he was working on, it wasn't in the official manuals. And when he vanished, so did his notes. By the 1950s, the base had been decommissioned, its hangars left to rot under the desert sun. Sand buried the runways, scorpions nested in the barracks. Yet, locals swore they could still hear engines start up at night, even when the base was empty. They said a dog's bark sometimes echoed from the darkness, followed by the metallic click of landing gear. Highway patrolmen reported seeing lights hovering over the abandoned airfield before vanishing. It became a forbidden place, one avoided even by scavengers. Every so often, someone brave enough to enter claimed to find paw prints in the dust, circling what remained of the runway. Each time, the tracks ended at the same spot, near where Tango 9 had once stood. When the metal tag was unearthed in 2009, the story resurfaced. Archaeologists assumed it was a coincidence, just another relic of the war. But the tag's placement, directly beneath the runway, raised questions. It hadn't simply fallen there, it had been buried. Tests showed the metal contained a unique alloy used only in aircraft manufacturing, specifically in experimental flight systems from the 1940s. If the tag truly belonged to Hale's dog, how did it end up sealed beneath concrete laid after his disappearance? The more they analyzed it, the stranger it seemed. Embedded in the metal's corrosion was residue from high-voltage current, as if it had been struck by lightning or something far more powerful. After the discovery, researchers combed through archived flight rosters and personnel files. Most names from Eagle Field West were accounted for, except Hale's. Then, in a forgotten Army warehouse in Barstow, a technician uncovered a crate labeled Unidentified Property, 1945. Inside were photographs, damaged film reels, and one personnel card stamped Hale, M, reclassified 1946. The classification field read MIA, Restricted Project, but no project was listed. One photograph showed a man and a golden retriever standing before a glowing aircraft component, something unfamiliar, something ahead of its time. And behind them, faintly visible, a warning sign, Experimental Frequency Test. Do not approach. Shortly after Hale's disappearance, airmen stationed nearby reported a strange phenomenon. Their radios would pick up static bursts whenever passing over Eagle Field West. Sometimes, in between the noise, voices emerged, brief, garbled transmissions repeating numbers and phrases. One pilot swore he heard a dog barking through his headset at 15,000 feet. Technicians dismissed it as interference. But decades later, amateur radio operators confirmed the frequency band around 2835 MHz still emitted faint rhythmic pulses near the old base. When translated to Morse timing, the pattern spelled out a single word: Jack, coincidence, or a ghost in the machine. In 2013, a historian from UC Riverside accessed recently declassified Air Force documents related to wartime radar experiments. Among them was a file referencing Hale modification, phase resonance engine study. It contained sketches, crude, hand-drawn, of a B-25's power core connected to strange wiring. The name Jack appeared again, scrawled beside a symbol resembling a lightning bolt. The document ended abruptly, the last page burned at the edges. If Hale had truly been experimenting with electrical resonance or early radar weaponry, it might explain the scorch marks found beneath the runway decades later. But how did a dog's collar tag become part of the mystery? Was Jack simply a bystander, or part of something larger? Curiosity led to excavation. In 2015, permission was granted to dig beneath the cracked edges of Eagle Field West's main runway. Beneath 3 feet of sand and concrete, archaeologists found a shallow cavity lined with melted glass, as if the soil itself had fused under intense heat. Fragments of aircraft metal littered the pit, twisted and blackened. Among them were 2 bone fragments, small, curved, and animal in shape. Tests confirmed they belonged to a medium-sized retriever. The pieces were fused to metallic residue containing traces of copper and titanium, elements consistent with high-energy discharge. Something powerful had happened there, something that turned earth, metal, and bone into one. 1 year later, an anonymous collector sent an undeveloped film roll to a museum in Bakersfield. The negatives, when processed, revealed a haunting image: the silhouette of a man standing on a runway, a dog beside him, both facing a blinding light. Their shadows stretched across the tarmac like fingers reaching for the sky. Written on the back were 3 words: "He stayed behind." Experts dated the film to 1945. Though the man's face was obscured, his uniform matched Hale's unit. And in the dog's silhouette, one could faintly see the glint of a collar tag, reflecting the same light that would one day reveal it again. The photograph was the last piece of physical evidence ever found. After the image surfaced, engineers revisited the site with modern scanning equipment. They detected faint electromagnetic signatures beneath the ground, oscillations repeating at intervals consistent with WWII radar beacons. At their strongest point, every device within 50 feet would momentarily shut down. When power returned, digital recorders captured low-frequency interference. The waveform, when converted to sound, produced a brief sequence resembling a heartbeat, followed by what experts described as a single bark. Skeptics called it pareidolia, but those who stood there in the dark desert, listening, swore it sounded alive, as if the base itself was remembering. Today, the story of Jack and Sergeant Hale has become a local legend in the Mojave. Travelers who stop near the old airfield claim to see a golden shape darting between the dunes at dusk. Pilots flying overhead report sudden bursts of static on their radios, followed by a single word whispered through the interference: home. Whether born of guilt, grief, or something beyond science, their story has endured. It's told in quiet tones by veterans, passed between generations as a symbol of loyalty, the kind that defies time and distance. Some say Jack never left that runway, that he's still waiting for a command that never came, and perhaps, in some way, so is his master. Today, Eagle Field West is nothing more than sand and memory, but the wind still carries a strange charge there, the kind that lifts the hairs on your arms and makes radios hum. No official report has ever explained what happened to Sergeant Hale, or why a dog's collar tag lay hidden beneath the runway for 70 years. Maybe it was an accident, a forgotten relic of war, or maybe the tag wasn't lost. Maybe it was left as a marker, a sign that loyalty never dies, even when men do, because some bonds are stronger than time, and some ghosts don't haunt out of sorrow, but duty. Perhaps Jack was never abandoned at all. Perhaps he stayed behind, guarding the silence of a secret sky. History doesn't vanish. It gets buried. Subscribe for more Forgotten Frontiers.